Sorry. Okay, I am so excited. How's everybody doing? This has been a great event. We've got 36,000 people on the live stream, and I'm so honored that we've got Senator Hawley here to have a conversation about competition and some AI. Senator, we've been having some fun slides to introduce our speakers, and so this is an example. I think the prompt was make a picture of Senator Hawley and Luther, but make it like an Etch-a-Sketch fireside chat. Senator Hawley is the senior U.S. Senator from Missouri, serving since 2019, a member of the Republican Party. He previously served as Missouri's Attorney General from 2017 to 2019. Hawley holds a law degree from Yale University and clerked for Chief Justice John Roberts before entering private practice and later academia as a law professor. In the Senate, he serves on the Judiciary, Homeland Security, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, and Small Business Committees. His legislative focus includes issues related to technology regulation, foreign policy, and economic policy. Please provide a warm welcome for Senator Hawley. I'm going to speak with him now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So, at the beginning of this conference, I said, everywhere in Washington you go, like you throw a rock and you're going to, oh, actually, you know what? I got to do one thing here. We're not going to etch a sketch the whole time. Sorry. Oh, no, sorry. Back one. There we go. I said at the beginning, we're not going to have just an AI conference because there's been so much conversation about AI in Washington. It's like every day there's 3 different AI conferences. But we want to make an exception here, Senator Hawley, because you've been such a leader and such an important voice on this, and obviously it's intertwined with competition policy. I'm curious, Senator, when Vice President Vance was out in Paris about a month and a half ago, he gave a pretty big speech about AI policy, if you had any reaction to that.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and thank you for the terrific work that you're doing and the terrific work that this group does, and for having me to the summit. Yeah, I think it's interesting. The Biden administration, when it came to AI policy, the Biden administration had an approach that they called safety, sort of AI safety, which really sort of boiled down to, in my view, AI DEI. I mean, that seemed to be sort of their priority in using and training AI. There are some elements of my party, the vice president speaks for some of this, I think, who want to talk about AI opportunity. I'll just be honest with you, I'm a little worried that means rule of the robber barons, laissez-faire, just anything goes, let the incumbents who can currently control 75% or so of foundation models, let them just keep going. I don't think that ought to be our framework. I think our framework ought to be liberty. What is enhancing to Americans' liberty and to our way of life? What's going to protect our rights? What's going to protect our labor? What's going to bring us more jobs? What's going to make us more prosperous? And when I say us, I mean everybody. I don't mean what's going to make a few people on Wall Street more prosperous. We know what that looks like. I mean what's going to enhance the liberty and the prosperity of the great mass of the American people, of the middle class, of our working people. I think that ought to be our focus, and I think we've got a lot of work to do to get there. I think it's a little bit like, I've been thinking over and over about President Kennedy's speech in 1963, I think it was, when he went to Rice University, maybe it was 62, when he went to Rice University and gave his famous moon speech. And he talked then about the technologies that we were just on the frontier of. And he said we need to vow that our mission into space and the technology that we will develop from that will be for the good of mankind, will be for the good of the American Republic. I think we need to make a similar vow as a country when it comes to AI. AI has the potential to be hugely transformative. We want that to be transformative in a liberty-enhancing way that protects the liberty and the prosperity of the American people, and I think that ought to be our North Star.
Got it. How do you deal with, when you're talking about, there's been sort of a, earlier on the stage we had Steve Bannon with Rohit Chopra, Lena Khan was here earlier. Your name comes up a lot in kind of the conversation around realignment and this sort of interesting bipartisan work on, how do we make technology operate for working people? And can you tell me about sort of how you think about that? What is the, does that worry you, what the effect of AI will have on working people?
Oh, absolutely it does. I mean, I think we need to be honest about this. I mean, the potential for AI in a very short space to work a real revolution for middle-class folks is extremely high. I come from a town of 5,000 people. There was a number of folks who made their living in the town as small-town lawyers. Let's just be honest. I mean, if AI continues on this trajectory, I'm thinking of generative AI, if it continues on this trajectory, we may be saying to a lot of those people, you're not going to have a livelihood anymore. And we're talking about a lot of middle-class folks who support families in communities like the one I'm from. But also, we need to be concerned about labor. I'm thinking of blue-collar labor. I mean, as we continue with sort of the robotics revolution, as AI gets integrated there, who's going to staff and run warehouses, factories, trucking? So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be concerned about there. And this comes back to, we've got to figure out a path forward that is liberty and prosperity enhancing, where we can say honestly to the middle class in this country, this is going to be good for you and your family. Where we can say honestly to blue-collar workers in this country, this is going to be good for you and your family. It's going to make you more prosperous. It's going to make you more free. We're going to protect your rights. And I think something Congress can do now is we can work on protecting the rights of individuals in the AI space. We haven't done that. We haven't done anything successfully, frankly, when it comes to the tech space. But what we could certainly do is we could work on protecting some basic rights. We know how to, number one, we value property rights in the United States of America. We know how to assign property rights. And rather than some very government-heavy, regulatory-heavy, top-down approach, what I would prefer to do, and what I think would be rights protecting, is to say, okay, we're going to protect the following categories of rights: personally identifiable information, data that is copyrightable or has been copyrighted, which is creative work, written material, pictures, things that can be reduced to a medium. And we're going to say American law has traditionally protected all of those things. We should say to folks, we're going to protect those in the AI age, and we're not going to do it necessarily with a huge new data agency. We're just going to affirm in American law that you have property rights in these. We're going to allow you to go to court and to protect those property rights, and then we'll allow the market to work. But I think we need to put a regime in place that is protective of working people and individual Americans, and where everybody knows what the playing field is, and that, by the way, does not favor the incumbent companies. Because what you often find with regulation, I know I don't need to tell anybody in this crowd, is that the huge incumbents, the 2 or 3 biggest companies, the monopolists, they would love to have a massive government regulatory framework because they'd love to write it in such a way that only they can comply with it. We don't want that. We want more competition, not less. We want more entrants into the market, not fewer. And I think we can protect individuals' rights and enhance liberty while also enhancing competition. In fact, I think those things sit together.
Is that vision, let me ask you this, are you a techno-optimist?
I don't know about that. I'm a techno-concerned. How about that?
Because the little tech is techno-optimistic, and that's kind of part of why, everybody's in the back and kind of in the aisle saying, what is this conference about? And I think it's about trying to create a space where we can, when I moved to San Francisco in 2007, you went to Stanford, right. So you kind of breathed the air and drank the water. We're around a lot of these techie folks, and you know this well, but it's like there's a...
That's why I'm not an optimist. No,
well,
I'm just kidding.
I hear you, but I moved there in 2007. So yeah. I moved there in 2007 during this Web 2 explosion, and it was it was optimism, and there was this sort of siren song where if you're like a young 20s person, it's like, why would you want to live anywhere else than building a cool internet company right now? Now, this is when the web was more pluralistic, it was more diffused. It's not that way anymore, and it's less competitive, and that's why I think the role that YC plays to sort of fight for little tech, Gary, my CEO, testifying before the subcommittee you're part of, is there room for techno-optimism in this sort of political space that you occupy, that sort of Lena Khan occupies, that where there's this sort of overlap? And that's what I'm trying to figure out. What part of your vision can a little tech founder take away and say, okay, this is... Josh Hawley's not like a Luddite.
Well, I think that this comes back to the point that we were at, I think, in the early 1960s. This is a decision that we need to make together as a society. We need to ask ourselves, I think we can decide, are we going to use AI to the enhancement of our society? Are we going to use it to further enhance our liberty and prosperity? Or are we going to be mastered by it? And so I'm a tech mastery guy. I want us to decide together that we're going to master the technology and use it. President Kennedy talked about we're going to go to the moon and we're going to use the technology we developed there for peace. We're not going to allow it to become a field of war. We need to say something similar now, I think, in this day and age, that we're going to develop these technologies in a way that enhances our prosperity and our liberty, that protects the rights of all Americans. That's very optimistic, but we've got to make a choice. So what I'm not for is, let's just go along and see what happens. Let's just allow the dominant companies, let's allow the biggest big tech players just to do what they want. Let's open it up for them, no holds barred. Guys, just do whatever you want. I think we've seen what that looks like. We've seen that in the social media space. It's like a field of horrors. We have seen that earlier in the 1990s and the early 2000s with the trade agenda. I don't really want to play that movie over again because I think, frankly, AI is going to be much more powerful. I mean, social media has been transformative in many ways. That's nothing compared to what AI is going to be, just nothing. So I think we've got to make a commitment together as a society. And what you're fighting for open markets, for open competition, for more, that I think is absolutely essential to achieving that kind of broad-based liberty and prosperity that I'm talking about.
Is there, I want to go back to the Vance speech, because one thing that I thought was really interesting about it was that he talked about the EU AI Act, he talked about the Digital Services Act, he talked about GDPR, and these are all, for folks that track European regulation, all three of these are pretty unpopular regulations. I think notably kind of omitted mentioning the Digital Markets Act, which if you remember ICOA, sometimes I think people trying to sort of conflate or mischaracterize that ICOA said, that's like America's DMA. But it is true that Little Tech is pro-DMA. We have written letters to President Trump saying, hey, please, with respect to DMA, set that aside. There's all kinds of, there may be a basis for some kind of trade dispute in other areas, but it doesn't make sense for the White House to be putting its neck out for Tim Cook and sort of retaliating against Europe, cracking down on anti-competitive behavior in a way that really the little tech companies advocated for. And I'm just curious how your office thinks about that, because I feel like, on one hand, we want to bring jobs back to America. We want America to be strong. I'm totally sympathetic to these points, but with respect to how, if it's the only tool on the globe that's, promoting interoperability and reducing self-preferencing over at Apple and Google. Is there a way to sort of take that off the negotiation table and encourage that? And can we get something like that in the U.S.?
Yeah, I hope the answer is yes to both. I think I agree with you 100% about where we are in terms of what we should be doing with Europe. I actually, in the first Trump administration, I urged then Trade Rep Bob Lighthizer to stop going to bat for the big tech companies on this very issue. I said, Bob, why are you carrying their water? This is anti-competitive. I mean, the policies they want, they're trying to enshrine globally. They're trying to get out of these requirements in Europe. That's just anti-competitive. We shouldn't be helping them with that. We should be promoting competition in our market and elsewhere, but especially here at home. So I think your first point is well taken. Should we do something like that in the United States? Yeah, we ought to promote interoperability. We ought to make sure that the big incumbents aren't self-preferencing, which we know they are. I mean, Google is being sued for it at the moment, which is hugely promising, incidentally. But I think
guilty of it.
Exactly right. And eagerly we await the remedies. But I think that this is promoting competition and making sure that these incumbents cannot act as monopolists. We have a rich antitrust tradition in this country for a reason, and it comes back to my point about liberty. We have an antitrust tradition. We have antitrust law, because we believe that liberty and open competition are intimately connected. And we believe that those things are the best way to promote the well-being of normal working Americans. And just kind of make a point about jobs, I hear a lot of talk about how AI is going to create hundreds of thousands of new jobs. I hope that that's true. And I hope that the jobs that are created are good jobs that you can support a family on, not sweeping floors at a data center or mining in Greenland. So, I mean, I think we need to ask ourselves what really, when we talk about the promises of this technology and when we develop the technology, this goes back to mastering the technologies. We think about how we develop it and how we deploy it. We need to deploy it in a way that enhances the prosperity of your blue-collar worker, of your middle-class professional, not destroys it. Maybe AI, you can imagine a world in which AI would raise the country's GDP by, maybe multiple percentage points. But if that is all captured by a small group here, and then everybody else here working in America is suffering from it, that's not progress. That's not progress at all. And am I a tech optimist? I'll be optimistic when this group of people right here, when our middle class and our working class, when they are benefiting. That's what I hope
What's
for.
the most sort of compelling or persuasive vision that you've heard that's been articulated along those lines?
Well, I think that hopefully we'll be able to use AI technology to increase worker productivity. So I don't want to see workers be displaced. I don't want to see the warehouses completely empty and filled with robots. I'll just be honest with you. If that makes me a Luddite, sign me up for it. I don't want to see trucks being driven entirely autonomously and we lose the entire trucking industry in the United States of America. I don't want to see that. Now, if you tell me there's another vision of that future where actually we can enhance the productivity of the factory, we can enhance the productivity of real workers in the warehouse, we can get those gains that lead to higher wages, sign me up for that. That's, I think, where we need to go and what we need to do. But I think this is, again, these are choices. These are social choices that we need to make. And I hope that, when I say we, I mean as a society. I don't necessarily mean as government. But we need to, I think seriously about what kind of future do we want to have here, and a future in which we have an economy that works for a group of people in Silicon Valley, God love them, and a group of people in Wall Street, but nobody else, and everybody else has to be sustained by government payments. That's not good. Like that, we don't want that society. We want a society of broad-based prosperity, and that's what we ought to be using the technology for.
I really respect you, Senator Hawley, because you were kind of like the OG on these issues in the Republican Party. I will never forget getting sort of an alert, I think it was in 2017 when you were Attorney General, right. And it was like just out of the blue, because I'd been going around to state capitals and talking to a lot of AG offices, educating them on Google issues, had not yet made a stop to Missouri, and then out of the blue just drops from the sky. Attorney General Josh Hawley from the state of Missouri is bringing an antitrust suit against Google. It's like, wow. And then I think I got on a plane to St. Louis to Jefferson City that day. You have moved the Overton window in the Republican Party in the Senate. And, having lived now in Washington for about 10 years and working on these issues, I mean, part of the whole idea of creating sort of a government relations position within Y Combinator is that this town sometimes feels like a Truman Show run by big tech. Mm-hmm. Between the think tanks, the front groups, the interest groups, the law firms, the econ firms, it's you throw a rock, you're going to hit somebody on Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft's payroll. And I'm curious, how do you navigate? Do they just kind of leave you alone? I mean, is it kind of like, I imagine lobbyists don't knock on Bernie Sanders' door, or, these people who sort of have stereotypically kind of, position themselves in sort of adversarial ways against particular industries. You have a front row view to how Washington operates, and I'm curious, what are the, what is kind of the most disgusting thing you're seeing? To basically sort of articulate that sort of how this works. We had Brody Mullins, the author of Wolves of K Street, all about the history of the industry. Give us a little insight into that world, and then tell us how you think, if you're like the two guys in a garage and you've raised a couple million, you've got a cool, promising idea. You definitely don't have enough to afford a lobbying firm or whatever. How should they be navigating Washington besides calling me?
Well,
so two-part question. Number one,
for the second part,
yuckiest K Street stuff, and how do we help? How does Little Tech help itself?
Little Tech is always welcome in the Hawley office, and we don't talk much to big tech, or when I say not much, I mean at all. I think I've joked, but it's only like 5% joking, that the Senate ought to have a plaque on the door that says "Property of Big Tech," because seriously, just about nothing moves across that floor that big tech doesn't want. If they don't sign off on it, And it doesn't. I've learned it doesn't matter what party's in charge. The Democrats were just in charge for 4 years. To be honest, I actually thought that maybe that would help on some of these tech issues. Didn't at all. Yeah. Chuck Schumer wouldn't bring up anything of any import for a vote. We got unanimous, amazingly, in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Durbin and I were able to work together on really significant legislation in order to get rid of CSAM, sexual exploitation material, to get rid of that online that went right at these big incumbent companies. It was passed unanimously out of the Judiciary Committee and couldn't get a vote. Couldn't get a vote. So, listen, nobody has more power in Washington, D.C. than big tech. And I remember, do they talk to me? No. I remember when Mark Zuckerberg, the last time Mark Zuckerberg came to see me, in person. He and I famously, we've had a number of go-rounds in committees.
He was at the Oval Office while Bannon was on stage today.
I'm sure.
I saw a tweet today.
I'm sure. But he came to see me, I guess it would have been in 2020 at some point. And at that time, I was challenging him to spin off Instagram. And I think he had this idea that, well, I'll sit down with Hawley and I'll explain things to him, and he'll understand that what he's saying is ridiculous. And he'll understand that, of course, then Facebook, now Meta, ought to be allowed to do whatever they want. So the meeting didn't go very well because I'd start out with me saying, so when are you going to spin off Instagram? And he looked at me and he was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I said, this is not going to be a very good meeting. And it was just downhill from there. So since then, I don't think we've spoken to any of the tech incumbents. They just don't bother with me anymore. They know what my position's going to be. But my view is this: it should not be that the Senate is bought and paid for by big tech. It should be, to go back to your example of a couple of folks in a garage, they ought to be able to think, hey, I've got it. This is America. If I invent something that's great, I should have a great shot to be able to bring that to market, to scale it up if I'm able to do so. It shouldn't be that there's these 2 or 3 monopolists who are suffocating the entire market, suffocating competition, and that's exactly what they're doing. And we all know it. They've been doing it for years. And we've got to stop it. And really, there needs to be more movement in the court system, but we need to think about what we can do legislatively to make antitrust enforcement tougher, to put more teeth into it, to give individuals more control over their personal property rights, and to promote competition.
But does it mean is it campaign finance? Is it overturning Citizens United? It seems like the core of it is some kind of, I think Klobuchar said they spent $270 million to kill Alcoa a few years ago. And so how does this little tech have a fighting chance? I don't have an answer. Are there more foundational things that have to be tackled there? Or is it, I think our hope is that, authentic stories of founders and kind of speaking as sort of a hive will help kind of counter it. But, I'm legitimately, looking for ideas about what we can do to sort of, I guess what I should say is, do those authentic stories matter in Congress, or at the end of the day, is there some secret deal that causes, the leader to not bring it to the floor?
Well, I think that the stories really do matter, and the proof of that is it's very hard to vote for the monopolists and against startups, against innovators, against entrepreneurs. It's very hard to vote for the monopolists and against victims if you actually have to go on the record. And this is why a year ago in the Senate Judiciary Committee, when Senator Durbin and I were able to put together this bill on CSAM material, and actually Durbin as chair insisted on a vote, to his great credit, because his own party tried to talk him out of it. He insisted on a vote, and lo and behold, the vote becomes unanimous. Why? Because when they actually have to put their dime down, it is impossible to explain to constituents, impossible to explain why you voted against victims of sexual exploitation. I think the same is true for almost all of this. This is why senators desperately try to keep these bills out of committee and off the floor. They don't want to vote on them. And that's why big tech does the same. They want to make sure there's no light of day. So I think what needs to happen, sunshine. We need more transparency, and frankly, we need a few people with courage on key committees who are willing to say, I'm going to introduce the legislation, I'm going to force a vote on the legislation, I'm going to put people on record. And if you want to overturn Citizens United as part of that package, I'm all for that. I think that case is wrongly decided.
So we've got 19 seconds on the shot clock here. So yes or no question, are you more optimistic? I guess this is actually an easy question. Are you more optimistic with Senator Thune in charge of the Senate that something like that could come to the floor?
Yeah, I hope so. I have to be. As a Republican, I got to believe in my team. But I hope that, he would look and just see and look at the bipartisan support, but also just look at the facts. I mean, just ask yourself, do you want to have competitive markets in this country or not? Do you want to have individuals who have some control over their lives, victims who have some means of redress or not? And do you want the country to be run by oligarchs or not? I mean, that's really, at the end of the day, a foundational question. Who should have the power in the country? Should it be the American people? Should it be the middle class? Should it be entrepreneurs and innovators? Should it be the upstarts? Or should it be this small group of incumbents who want to control the power? We've had to answer this question over and over in American history at key points. We have always answered it. We want the power to be here. We want the people to have the power. We want markets to be open. We're in another period where we need to answer it again. And I hope that my party, which was the original antitrust party, I like to say Republicans basically invented antitrust. Theodore Roosevelt, my political hero, the greatest antitrust president still ever. I wrote a book about him years ago when I was at Stanford. And I still think we have a lot to learn from him. And I hope that today's Republican Party will draw on and once again reclaim that legacy.
Senator Hawley, please give a round of applause for Senator Hawley. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I've got to come back over here now.